Hello and welcome everybody to this demonstration of the Registration User Interface, or RUI 1.7.0. The RUI was developed to allow its users to register tissue blocks within reference organs. As you can see, it is a web deployed tool. You can get to the tool yourself by simply going to this URL. So as we get to the website, we are being greeted by this modal window where we're being asked for some basic information. So first we have to type in our first and last names. Of course, the browser remembers what I previously entered, so that is a fairly quick step. Then I have to choose the donor sex for my first registration. In this case, I'm going to go with female. And then we have to select an organ. We are now supporting 11 organs in the RUI. You can see all of those listed here, so you can press these little arrows to get through the carousel here. And for this case, let's just go ahead and use the lungs. We click the lung. And then you can see that we can start a registration. This button then becomes blue, so I click, and then the scene is being set up for me. So the RUI consists of 3 panes. Here on the left side is the anatomical structure pane, in the middle is the 3D pane, and on the right side is the manipulation pane. So on the left side, we have, again, the donor sex, where we can switch any time if we have to. For now, I want to stay with the female version. And then we have here a list of anatomical structures. And so this allows me to set the opacity for structures that you can see here in the 3D scene. So for example, if I wanted to see more of the trachea, I can increase the opacity of the trachea here. We can see the trachea here. And then as I move this opacity slider around, we can see that I can change the opacity of this anatomical structure. I can also turn it off completely by clicking this eye icon here, and then it just disappears. Then similarly, I can do the same thing, for example, for the bronchus. So I can set the opacity all the way up, or I can remove it entirely. Another thing you can do is you can reset everything to the default values by clicking the circular arrow here, and then everything returns to the default, which is a 20% opacity for all anatomical structures. The next thing I would like to demonstrate are the common extraction sites in the previously registered blocks. Currently, I have neither for the lung, so I'm going to switch over to another tab real quick, where I'm going to show you the same thing with the large intestine. So here we have the large intestine, the female version, in fact. And here on the left side, you can see that we have a set of common extraction sites. These are visual landmarks where we identify together with experts that these are frequently used extraction sites for tissue. So in this case, we have 4 common extraction sites. We have the ascending, descending, sigmoid, and transverse colon. And here, just like with the anatomical structures, I can hover over this icon here, and then I can make them visible. So I click this eye icon here, and then I do the same thing down here. I do this for the sigmoid colon as well, and then for the transverse colon. And then you can see these green markers appear. And these green markers are the common extraction sites. Then of course I can also adjust the opacity again, so that in this case now I would have full opacity for all 4 of these. So again, these common extraction sites are markers for commonly used extraction locations. Now, to demonstrate another piece of functionality, I would like to show you that you can view previously registered blocks. So we have this button down here, previously registered blocks. If you click this button, then we are using information from your browser to display previously registered blocks for a particular organ. So for example, you can see here that I have done quite a few previous registrations on this particular machine for the left male kidney. So now let's go back to the lung. So this is the anatomy pane on the left that really allows you to customize what you see here in the 3D pane. So the 3D pane is where the actual 3D interaction happens. So you can see that we are looking at the organ from a certain angle, from a certain camera perspective. And this perspective is also shown here on the right with this little mannequin symbol. So currently we are in the anterior view. You can see that we are also looking at the anterior. We are having an anterior view of the mannequin here. And now I can change my camera positions. For example, I can go from anterior to right. And then the camera moves to the right side of the reference organ. We can see also that we are now on the right side of the mannequin. You can also go to the left or to the behind. Here we go. Let's go back to the anterior for now. So this is how you control the camera in order to customize the viewpoint that you have with regards to your organ. So that's a registration mode, and then we have also an overview mode. So if I click this little toggle switch here, we are making a switch in the way we control our camera. So previously we could only control our camera with these radio buttons. Now we have a fully functional orbit camera. What does that mean? If you click and drag your left mouse button, you can rotate the camera around. Just try that out, it's kind of fun. So yeah, left mouse button, press and hold. Now, if you click and drag your right mouse button, you can pan the camera, so you can move around the camera. And then finally, if you use your mouse scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out. This might take a little bit of practice, but it is a really neat way of exploring a 3D scene, basically with a lot more freedom that you would have in the registration view. However, in order to actually perform the registration, we have to go back into registration view. So I click the toggle button again, the toggle switch again. And now on the right side here, we can see a little yellow cube that turns blue when I hover over it. This is the tissue block that we want to register. So if I click and drag this tissue block, it follows the mouse, okay? And then let's say we have a piece of tissue that comes here from this upper part of the left side of the lung. I can go ahead and I can click and drag this in here. And then of course I'm gonna have to make some adjustments. So I can now, for example, switch to the left view like this. And then I can move this up a little just to make sure that I'm in the place that I want it to be. Okay. And then we can use the 3D preview mode by clicking the toggle switch again to zoom in, rotate around, and ensure that I really have registered what I wanted to register. So one thing, for example, that I might want to change here is the size, and this is where the manipulation pane comes into play. So first here we have the tissue block dimensions in millimeters, so that allows us to simply set the dimensions of this cuboid. Let's go with 8 by, let's do 6 plus 1 millimeter. There we go, and now as you can see it resizes quickly. Then I can input the number of tissue slices. So let's say, for example, here's thickness in micrometers. Let's say the thickness is, say, 10 micrometers, and I have 100 slices. There we go. And then we can also adjust the rotation here. So each of these sliders lets you rotate the block around one of its axes. So in this case, let's rotate it around the x-axis, like so, such that it is as flat as possible towards the upper part, like the upper boundary of the organ here. And then, and this is an interesting one, we have the anatomical structure tags, and this kind of brings us full circle back to the anatomical structures here. So let me go back into registration view. So as I grab the tissue block here, I'm going to move it out for a second. And in a second, I'm going to move it back in again. And I would like you to watch what happens here in this anatomical structure tags area. So I grab the tissue block and I move it in. And then as I get into the lung, we see these tags here appear. And so we are employing a system called collision detection, which is fairly common in 3D world. Imagine that you're watching a Hollywood movie and two vehicles are colliding, okay, like for a really cool action scene. Obviously, it is computer generated, but the computer has to have a way of knowing that a collision just happened. So there is a collision detection algorithm running. And then, of course, in a Hollywood movie, you get like really cool special effects. In our case, you get something very simple. You just get an anatomical structure tag. So this tells us that, hey, our tissue block has just collided with these anatomical structures. And you can see that these anatomical structures correspond to structures that we have here. And you may find that, for example, you know, some of these collisions may have been not correct. We are using the boundary boxes of each of these 3D objects. So the collisions might not always be 100% accurate. And in this case, you can go ahead and you can click this X here, and then you can just remove the anatomical structure tag, and you can also add some. So for example, if you think that you know, only parts of the registration so far are of the anatomical structures are correct, you can just type in one of the structures up here, click the little checkbox and then the plus, and then it appears here, and then you can see that it is marked as added by the user. For now, let's leave it out though. All right, so now let's go back into the 3D preview mode again, just to verify one more time that we did a good job here. Okay, so let's say we wanted to verify that we are actually really inside of the organ. Then I would go ahead to the anatomical structures, go to the lung here, and set the opacity all the way to 100. And then I would make sure that the tissue block is completely enclosed within the outer surface of the organ, which seems to be the case here. Let's go back into registration mode, the anterior view, and enjoy this beautiful lung here. All right, now we have created this registration data, but what do we actually do with it, or how do we actually get it out of there? So you can click this review and download button down here when you are done, and then you are presented with this registration review. So this contains all of the data that we just generated, or most of it. So we have the first name, last name, we have the name of the reference organ, then we have some geometric information such as the dimensions, position, and rotation of our tissue block. We have the anatomical structure tags, a timestamp, and then a unique alignment ID. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to download this registration data to my machine. Here we go. And now let's just have a little look at what this data set actually looks like. So here I now have the JSON file open that I just downloaded. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And that is the format that we chose to capture and also share the data with some of the backend tools in the CCF and across HubMap. So you do not really need to understand any of the things that you see here. This is just to show you what the data actually looks like. You can see that all of these things here, these correspond to some of the data that you saw inside the RUI, okay? And yeah, this is essentially what you create. And so you have that then on your machine. So let's go back to the RUI here. So now let's say that you created a registration and it was a tissue block that you extracted many times, and you just want to reuse it multiple times for multiple registrations. So let's go ahead to a blank slate of the RUI. So we are again being presented with the modal. So I'm going to type in my name one more time. And now let's say that I want to just recreate the registration that I just did. You can go to this blue Upload Previous Registration Data button. Then you select your registration data. And then you can see that everything is being reset just like it was before. So we can see our little tissue block just automatically resized and rotated and got put into place here inside the lung here. Finally, the last thing I want to go over is this info button up here. So if you click the info button, you are being taken to a little section about the usage of the RUI with a link to this video, by the way. And then we have an about section down here that explains a little more about the background. We have a link to a standard operating procedure that explains everything that I did here with in written form and with a little more detail depending on where you're coming from when you're using the RUI. And then we have acknowledgements here on the bottom. Okay, this was a demonstration of the RUI 1.7.0, which is a tool that allows users to register tissue blocks into reference organs. We are very glad that you are going to use that tool, and please reach out to us for any questions. Thank you.